analytics is a broad field. It is ever evolving. And the opportunities for professional development are vast. And the opportunities for growth are numerous. I mean, there's so many directions you can go. There are ways that you can progress depending on what you like to do. And I think that sport set the tone, was a platform for pursuing sport analytics in that way.
This episode of Ken's Nearest Neighbors is powered by Z by HP, HP's high compute workstation grade line of products and solutions. Today, I had the pleasure of interviewing Liz Wanless. Dr. Wanless researches advanced applications to various aspects of sports organizations and their operations, from customer relationship management to the diffusion of natural language processing, otherwise known as NLP. In 2021, Dr. Wanless was awarded the Ohio University College of Business Excellence Intellectual Contributions Award, as well as the Outstanding Teaching Recognition. Dr. Wanless published more than 20 peer-reviewed publications in outlets including the Journal of Sports Management, Sport Management Review, Journal of Sports Analytics, Journal of Strength and Conditioning, Journal of Issues in Intercollegiate Athletics, and International Journal of Sports Science and Coaching. Additionally, she's given over 60 peer-reviewed and invited presentations at conferences including the North American Society for Sports Management, Inform Sports, Sports Marketing Association, Applied Sport Management, Annual Fund Analytics and Execution Symposium, and the National Sports Forum. Prior to her outstanding academic career, Dr. Wanless competed for Nike, Asics, the New York Athletic Club, and Team USA as a professional track and field shot putter, maintaining a top 20 world ranking for 5 consecutive years. In 2004, Dr. Wanless was recognized as the NCAA Woman of the Year for the state of Maine. In our conversation today, we talk about how Liz was able to find the same passion for data that she had for athletics. We also talk about her own experience with imposter syndrome in the male-dominated field of sports analytics, and we learn why aren't there more women working in the sports analytics domain. Dr. Wanless has an awesome story, and I'm excited to share my chat with her with you all. So Liz, thank you so much for coming on the Ken's Nearest Neighbors podcast today. I read your article. I think it was the Sports Business Journal. And after I read it, I said I had to reach out to this person. You've been working in sports analytics. You have an incredible story as an athlete as well. And I wanted to be able to share your story with other people and hear more about it from you yourself.
I'm glad to be here. I'm happy to be sharing with this podcast. You have made your reputation well known in the sport analytics industry. So I'm glad to be here for that reason, and also to connect with your audience about women in sport analytics.
Excellent. And that's something that, to be perfectly honest, I don't feel I can comfortably talk about as well as you can. I think that there's some missing pieces for me to have that conversation. So I'm really glad that you can come in and share your experience, but also talk about some of the ways that we could improve like the overall value that individuals bring to an organization and the overall way that organizations can strive for a more diverse and frankly a better workplace. Before we get into those extremely important topics, I would love to introduce you further to the listeners by you telling maybe a little story about how you first got interested in data to begin with.
Sure, I will start at the very beginning of my sport analytics journey, which was surprisingly after quite a bit of education under my belt. So I had finished my doctoral degree, had taken math classes and statistics classes throughout my academic progression. So as I was a graduate of Bates College, it's a small school in the New England Small College Athletic Conference known for academics. And while I was a philosophy major, in my electives, I chose linear algebra and calculus. That should have been assigned at the time, but I didn't realize until after I finished my doctoral program and had enrolled in my first business analytics class that this was something I was going to love doing, that I was going to love merging the business analytics and sports space. Now, of course, in between my undergraduate and my finishing my doctoral degree, you know that I had an athletic career. I was a professional shot putter. So it just seemed that when the two met, that this was going to be something that I could really invest in for a career, for the duration of my career, investigating how those two, and of course, intuition from individuals outside of the analytics process, how all of those things merge together.
Was there something specific about the problems or about the methodology that made the business analytics space really appealing to you? What was it that really drew you in so much?
Oh my gosh, the coding process, where you can study code and you can work through the basics and the foundational elements, but the first time that you code your own analysis and it works, and it's hard to describe that feeling unless you've been there, but it's like going to the store and finding the shirt that you exactly want, and it's on sale at the same time. It is this great feeling that when you complete the coding process for an analysis and you get the results that you're looking for, that tell the story of the data in the way that you want to, that is a wonderful process. It's a very process-oriented approach, feeling that I have, that really created that interest level for me.
I think it probably taps into some weird variable reward system that keeps us all coming back. I remember so many times, particularly in school, I think it happens a little bit less for me in the real world, when I would run something and it would work, probably because I was doing more like actual software engineering in school, and I'd be like, I was going in fully expecting it not to work, and then it runs and I'm like, oh my goodness, like,
I know.
wow. And like, if you really step back and think about it, you're like, okay, the goal was for it to work, right?
Right.
Like, you're striving to make it work. The opposite should happen. It should work more often than not, but it rarely happens. It's kind of like for me hitting a golf shot, right, where I set up to it, and like, if you really think about it, like, you're trying to get it in the hole, like the odds of it going closer to the hole are probably higher than you think. But when you do what you expect it to do, which is kind of sad, like you're doing what you exactly were trying to do, it's unbelievably rewarding and fulfilling.
I completely agree. And you and I can relate about this with the individual sport and the sport that happens in very short periods of time, like the perfect throw, where you feel it, just the shot put come off your fingertips and you know that you've thrown far. It is supposed to work. And there's a lot, though, that has to happen in order for it to work. And I felt the same way about the coding process, that you get a few error messages, you're bumping your head against the wall, especially in an implied environment when you're taking on projects that aren't necessarily geared toward learning a specific analysis toward a specific outcome. You know, when you are really out there, it's very rewarding when you see that next line come up, you know, in R, you see that next little triangle come up. You're just like, okay, this is great.
Well, you know, I think it might almost be more rewarding because of the struggles and the errors that you do get and all those things, that when it, you know, if everything worked on the first time, it wouldn't feel so good, right? And I think
Right.
it's the same thing in sport, where it's like, if all of them were perfect throws, or every shot that I hit perfect, like, it probably wouldn't really be as addicting to a certain extent, or
Mhm.
you wouldn't want to put in all the effort and those types of things. Not to go too far down the sports rabbit hole, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about your passion for shot put and where that developed, and then how that also leaks into what you do in the data domain. You know, like the same energy. Whenever I hear you talk both about data analytics as well as shot put, you just like really light up. You're clearly passionate about both these things, and I'd love to hear a little bit more of the origin of at least the first passion, and we all know it bleeds into the second one.
It's true. It really is. I think it's a mindset that I had sport pulled it out of me, and then I was able to channel it in a different way to sport analytics. But I remember as a sophomore in high school, one of my friends said to me casually, "Hey, if you're not doing a spring sport, why don't you try out for the track team?" We were both volleyball players at the time. So I tried out for the track team, and it was a lot of fun, especially at the high school level. And then something happened. So we were competing, and we're in the Midwest. So you're competing outside in cold weather. Now, fast forward, when I was competing at Bates, we competed in snow instead. When you first open up the outdoor track season, it is snowy. But anyways, back in the Midwest, it was just cold. So you compete along. And then all of a sudden it warmed up. So this is when everything changed, to be truthful. So I went out and I threw, and all of a sudden it was 4 feet farther than the last time. And that just caught me. I thought, oh my gosh, okay, let's figure out why that happened. Let's make it happen again. What can I do to make incremental progress? How can I improve? And the shot put is so telling. It is so truthful. You either throw it far or you don't. It's not as if anyone can block your shot. It really is just about you in the circle. So as I began on this journey for incremental progress, of course, I took it quite far. So I competed as a Division III athlete at Bates College and was a Division III All-American and a Division III national champion in indoor and outdoor. Then competed for a year at the University of Florida as a Gator. And then competed professionally after that, was a member of the 2005 World Championship team and an alternate for the 2008 Olympic team. But really, it all started with this notion of incremental progress and the intense curiosity about how to, in coding, we talk about making things work. In shot put, we talk about gaining an inch or throwing it farther. So I think that mindset and the intrinsic value from that is so easily applied to sport analytics. And I know you relate to your experiences with golf, that mindset translates over to this field very well. Analytics is a broad field. It is ever evolving. And the opportunities for professional development are vast. And the opportunities for growth are numerous. I mean, there's so many directions you can go. There are ways that you can progress depending on what you like to do. And I think that sport set the tone, was a platform for pursuing sport analytics in that way.
Well, I love the story you have there. And I think that there are so many parallels between obviously my experience in golf, but also in the process of learning a new domain, particularly the data field. You talked a lot about incremental progress, right? And in learning a new field, you're never gonna, I mean, you'll make some large leaps probably at the beginning, but it's about showing up and getting better every day or every week or every month. It's not about solving it, or it's not about learning data science in 6 months. Like, I don't think that that's possible, because the field continues to move along with you. Like, it's not a static thing that you can just conquer. And I also think it's pretty fascinating how both of the sports that we focused on, they're highly measurable, and they're also very like internally focused. You're competing against yourself. Like, yes, in both formats, you're trying to outthrow the other people, but what you're really trying to do every time you get in the circle, or I put a tee in the ground, is I'm trying to play the best the best round I can play, and you're trying to make the best throw that you can play, that you can throw every single time. And I think that nature is something that I think other people can grasp, but it's a different way about thinking about the world, right? Is that you're trying to maximize on what you do every time you compete, and all of your training leads up to that. And if we're thinking about what does that lead up to in school or in whatever it might be a project, it might be a question you're trying to answer. And everyone talks about the benefits of team sports, right? But I think that there's a lot of benefit in individual sports because you learn that failure, and that failure when you don't reach your expectations is also like, that's on you, right? And you have to deal with that. And data, like a lot of your analysis doesn't work out, right? A lot of it, but you still have to keep going to get that feeling of when it does work out. And to me, that is
Mhm.
something that I'm so grateful for in the experiences that I've had. And um, I also think that people who can resolve that failure are a lot more resilient, or are able to make incredible advances that other people can, but it might be a little harder to get to that mindset or that acceptance over time.
It may be. I think the other aspect of it is just knowing what failure and moving past failure looks like. So when you're on a track team, or when you're on a golf team, you experience that failure and you have a meet the next week. You can't just turn away. Same thing with team sports, although I agree with you that individual and team sports teach very different things. And being accountable to others, it feels different in an individual sport, although there's a team point allotment. It feels very different from volleyball to track. But I completely agree with you about dealing with failure and what sport can teach us about that. It's also listening to a podcast from MIT Sloan about what sport analytics on the field can teach sport analytics off the field, teach the business side. Now they were referring to business in general, but the idea is that on the field progresses faster, has progressed faster than off the field, meaning the business side. And there are clear, measurable metrics, clear goals, and competition on the field. And I think that clear measurement, and if you are someone who is thinking about progress, that clear measurement makes it very rewarding to put in the effort, because you look back. I mean, I look back even 3 years ago, even 3 months ago, to be truthful, and can see the progress because of that clear measurement when you are executing analyses, something that on the field analytics application can teach us, right?
Absolutely. I think it's probably worn out by now, but the idiom that what gets measured gets managed is one of the things that I live by. I found, for example, with YouTube content creation, when I started tracking things every day, the results, the growth that I had was unbelievable, even compared to the models that I built and the estimations that I had. And it's just because it's part of your attention, you focus on it a little bit more, which I think is fascinating. One part of athletics, and also I think the learning data science domain that we touched on offline a little bit, was just falling in love with the process. Can you talk a little bit more about your experience with that, and how you can convince yourself to fall in love with the process? I mean, for example, like I don't love the coding part. I love the problem solving part. And I realize coding is an incredible means to an end, but I have been able to trick myself into loving the coding part and enjoying that process quite frequently. I probably wouldn't have gotten to where I am if I didn't at least figure out how to do that at some point in time. Do you have any secrets on that front, or at least some ways that you've been able to really fall in love with that in the past?
I completely understand what you mean. And I think it is the management of that intrinsic investment, because extrinsically you get pulled. For example, working in academia, extrinsically I'm pulled to course evaluations. Extrinsically, I'm pulled toward publishing in certain journals. So I think falling in love with the process and staying in love with the process, retaining that love with the process, means understanding and feeling committed to a very clear value system, that underneath all of this expression of quantitative skill really is this deep admiration for excellence in quantitative execution. And that, as you described, doesn't just mean working with the numbers, working with data, analyzing the data, but it also means understanding and conceptualizing the business problem, being able to execute the project lifecycle from start to finish, including solution deployment, which when you're working with clients and organizations can almost be the most difficult part, is to find the pathway forward to put your insights to work. Falling in love with the process initially was not difficult because of the growth mindset, but staying in love with it when you are extrinsically pulled in different directions and you're almost forced to really heavily weigh those external circumstances. For example, they're tied to my role, they're tied to my position publishing in certain types of journals. You really have to have a firm set of values. And for me, the biggest driver of that value system is quantitative excellence. And knowing that the other external things, so to speak, are just expressions of that.
You know, I really love that, because this is something that I think I'm personally struggling with a little bit, is that I historically have been very intrinsically motivated to do almost everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people struggle with the opposite problem, is they want to turn external motivation into like internal motivation, right? And I think that for a lot of people, that's the secret, is that, hey, how do I take these outside factors that I want to achieve and like internalize them and make them align with a value system or whatever it might be. I think with content creation, for example, it's almost flowing the opposite direction, where I have, I love making videos. I love producing educational content. I love these things, but now there's like profit associated with it. There's sponsor obligations that I have. There's these other things that it's like, hey, you know, like you have to do this for XYZ reason. And I still enjoy it. I still love doing it, but that's a conflicting force that's like pulling things from the external into the external. And
Mm-hmm.
I love the idea that just falling back on the value system that I built, like, why do I do this? Because,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I want to like make people better informed about what this field is about, because I think that someone who might watch one of my videos is going to make a monumental improvement to the world using data. And if I could be a part of that, if I could help someone realize that this is an awesome field, or realize that there's techniques associated with this that can create value for themselves or whatever it might be, that's like an incredible rewarding thing. So you just gave me like months of therapy and a short amount of of talking. But no, I think that that's an incredible thing, and we can all really work on our value system. Something I would ask you is, how do you develop that value system to begin with? You know, is it just a lot of introspection, a lot of, for me, like journaling and stuff, or where does that originate from? Tough question, I realize.
Well, it is and it isn't. So I think there's a couple different ways to keep your compass pointing in the direction of your value system, rather than letting yourself get pulled. But I get pulled all the time. I have to reel it back in. My best performances for track and field and for sport analytics, the execution of those papers and analyses, they are always when I am focused on the process and when I pull myself back in from the external motivation. But I have a very clear picture of how I felt when I started, and I can kind of breathe myself back into that person when I began, and when there was no external, no external motivation, because it wasn't, there weren't things that I had to do with it. No one was pulling at me to be, or to execute analyses in certain ways, or I wasn't trying to get them into journals. But when I was in school, I know that feeling really well. So that's one. So revisiting your roots, right? And then second would be communicating with individuals about that value system and discovering what it is, pinpointing it and writing it down and keeping it top of mind, and making it concise. So there are three, right? And quantitative excellence is one of the professional ones. The other two are from, personal life type stuff. Being a force for good is another one.
Awesome.
But which brings, which makes the choice easy to choose writing an op-ed for Sport Business Journal about why we need more women in sport analytics, when that, to be honest with you, was tough. It was challenging to bring myself to do that. But that when you have that value system, you make decisions against it. So one, revisit your roots, how you felt when you started, why you got into it. And then second is, creating actually a list and then making decisions for that list, like a strategic plan, the Ken G strategic plan.
I love that. Well, and that's something I just made an Instagram post, I think a couple days ago. I was moving and I found all of the journals that I've written in for like the last 5 years, right? We had like 15 journals. And I went through it and I realized that, hey, I documented all these things. I documented what I was feeling, like what are the similarities over time. I can go back and look and see if I've like stayed true to myself over this period of time. Fortunately, there's some things that I've done well with. Unfortunately, there are some things that I let slip a little bit that I believe were important to me and probably still are important to me. But there's unbelievable amount of value in that documentation and the structure that you add to those things. I mean, I've written my goals down, or I don't even know what I would call them. I write now 15 things every morning that I hope to achieve in the day.
Oh, interesting.
And that's the same thing every day. It's like, oh my goodness. Like I want to improve myself every day. I want to be happy, but I don't want to be content. I want to read. I want to pursue mastery in some form. I'm not going to go through the whole list. I'll probably make a video on this at some point. So not too much secret sauce.
I was just going to say, this sounds like a podcast you've got to do.
Exactly. But having that semblance and reminding yourself constantly, I think is something that has been instrumental in any success or supposed success that I've had. And I'm grateful for myself 10, 20 years ago when I started doing that. So before we get off of the kind of sports domain topic in your history, I would love to learn more about your experience in essentially like playing an unwinnable game, right? In sports and athletics, it's all about the pursuit of perfection, but perfection does not exist. It's not within the realm of possibility. And I'm wondering what the mindset is around that. I think the same thing with learning data science is also there. There's no, in my mind, perfect project. There is no perfect algorithm. There is no perfect amount of learning you could do. You're always pursuing something that is effectively like not there. Like you're growing towards something, but you'll never reach the pinnacle. How do you think about that? Like, what is your mindset around that? And is that something that intimidates you or motivates you?
Oh, my goodness. That is a great topic to bring to the forefront, because I think that vision of perfection is something that young data scientists believe is a reality. That if you are executing analysis, there is a better and better and better way to do it, and a better way on top of that. Instead of thinking of using different types of analyses along a continuum, for example, precision versus interpretability. I mean, that there are trade-offs when you use certain analyses. And so having a clear idea of what story you're trying to tell and the investigation that you are undertaking can help you choose. But I think that creates a lot of imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome is something that I referenced in the article that women will encounter as an obstacle, as a challenge. But I've also found a lot of men in data science have it as well. Because as soon as I admit that that's something that was important for me to contend with, that so many others have the same issue. And I think it's just the nature of data science and this idea of perfection that you talk about, and that there's always something more to learn. So I contend with that by this idea of incremental progress, measuring myself against myself, having a clear picture of what rigor means. And that took a long time to develop, that creating a systematic integrative literature review. And I think that this is something we chatted about, of analyses and the way they are presented in literature, but also looking at GitHub as well, and places where that coding process is public, creating an integrative literature review, making yourself aware of the way that the stories are told, and being able to reflect back on the problem that you are to solve and choose from a broad context of ways, for example, to measure the outcomes of your model and what to report. Forming my own ideals of rigor has been incredibly helpful in that regard. So understanding imposter syndrome, knowing that it's there, relating to others about imposter syndrome, and then creating your own idea of what rigorous is. What is a rigorous analysis? And knowing that for yourself. And third, this idea of incremental progress, and knowing that each time that you conduct an analysis, you become better and better each time.
This episode of Ken's Nearest Neighbors is brought to you by Z by HP. HP's high compute, workstation grade line of products and solutions. Z is specifically made for high performance data science solutions, and I personally use the ZBook Studio and the Z4 workstation. I really love that the Z line can come standard with Linux, and they also can be configured with the data science software stack. With the software stack, you can get right into the work of doing data science on day one without the overhead of having to completely reconfigure your new machine. Now back to our show. I just love the idea of setting your own standards. I think that to me is something that a lot of people, they just get so wrapped up in what other people are doing. You know, oh, this person started 3 months ago and they did this project already, and I don't think I could do that in 3 months. Like, how is that even possible? You know, there's so much there when we focus outwardly rather than when we focus on ourselves and what we're capable of doing. To me, just being realistic with yourself and setting a plan. I mean, so much of what we've both been talking about to tackle something like this is like structure and like getting to know yourself and being real with yourself. Without a doubt, I mean, I experience imposter syndrome. I don't think there's anyone that I know within this field who has not experienced imposter syndrome, except for maybe like one person. But
they do, they're just not admitting it.
Probably. But
or maybe not, but still, yes, yeah. It is rampant within data science. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think imposter syndrome is a natural human phenomenon of people who are pushing themselves out of their comfort zone. So I'm not sure if you've read it yet, called the book Think Again by Adam Grant. He dives like deep into the science of imposter syndrome. It is unbelievable, like highly recommended read. But he actually, this might be a slight misinterpretation, but he believes it's a good thing, right? When we are feeling that, we're pushing ourselves out of our comfort zone. It should be a signal to us that we're where we should be, rather than the other way around. You know, like if you're not feeling imposter syndrome at some point in time, are you really challenging yourself enough to make progress? Are you really, you know, like taking that extra step? And if we reframe it so that, hey, like I'm feeling this doesn't feel good, everyone else is ahead of me. If you think, hey, this means I'm where I should be because I like to challenge myself, I'm one of these people that wants to push the envelope and make a difference and grow, that can transform the scary feeling into something really positive. And again, like
that's
I still feel
incredible reframing. Yeah. That's incredible. I really like that interpretation of imposter syndrome. And you talk about ways to encourage individuals, minorities into sport analytics. And I think that is very powerful because I will notice women experience versions of imposter syndrome. You can kind of tell when it's happening when they're talking about some of the assignments that they're doing in class. And I think that reframing is a really great step toward making the community feel welcome. All members of the community feel welcome in sport analytics, that realm. That's good. I'm going, Think Again is on my list.
Yeah, I can't take credit for that. I can take credit for applying it in my life, and it has made me immensely happier and open to more opportunities. You know, I wouldn't say that I ever had a real like fear of public speaking. I'm pretty extroverted. I like doing those types of things, But as I've done more of it and I've kind of gotten into this realm, like the idea, it eventually hits me like, oh, I'm talking to a lot of people in front of a camera, and you get uncomfortable. Like, why would they listen to me, right? Why would they care? Why would whatever it might be? And I've realized that, hey, like they're listening to me because I have a story to tell. It doesn't matter if it's a complex story or anything like that. At the very least, they're going to get entertainment value out of this, and that's the favor I can do to them. And that's grounded me a lot, is that, hey, like I like to push myself into different things. I took an improv class a couple months ago because it was just something very different and uncomfortable, and I loved it. I
Yes.
had so much fun. It was
Really?
unbelievable.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
it was
I
great.
get a lot of trepidation just from thinking about that. If the pandemic taught me anything, it's letting it flow is a good thing. I mean, my lectures, my class periods are just so planned. And so I realize the value of that, but there is probably zero part of me that would want to sign up for an improv class.
Well, so I started watching more
Kudos to
improv
you.
comedy on YouTube, and I was like, I think this is really funny. And like, if I'm thinking about transferable skills, especially like podcasting, right, where this is a non-scripted conversation for an hour, it kind of helps to be able to like train skills that would make me quicker on my feet or whatever it might be. And so, I'm like, okay, yes, I'm uncomfortable, but this means I'm growing in a way that I would like to grow to be better at my craft. And so, to me, that's like it's almost exactly that phenomenon kicking in. It's like, okay, well, gosh, this is uncomfortable, but maybe I'll surprise myself by saying something funny or something stupid or whatever it might be.
That's amazing. I applaud that, putting yourself out there. I applaud it.
Incredible. So, I mean, that book again is really fascinating. And something that he does describe is that in some types of imposter syndrome, like women and men face it differently. So, for example, in data science, the last I looked, I think the field is about 80% male and around 20% female from the last like Kaggle developer survey. I would imagine that sports analytics space is even less.
It is.
It's even more male dominated than just the broader data science space. And without a doubt, that means that if you're underrepresented, there's going to be more pressure, right? Just not having people of just around you that might share some like other commonalities is, in my mind, not a good thing, because I am a huge believer in diversity of thought. I think that by definition, we should have people from different backgrounds, educational as well, like with just different life experience, because that makes, to me, better analysis. I would like your maybe your experience with that giant gender inequality, but also perhaps some ways that you think that we can move forward and progress from where we currently are.
Sure. So in the article, as part of writing the op-ed, I did want to have some concept of what this realm really looked like. So many in the Big Four, which we extended our analysis. I had an undergraduate student, Sam Dredden, help me with this. He was super helpful. So we checked rosters to see how many women existed. Well, there were many teams without representation at all. And I have it listed for the different sport organizations, but there was no, or for the different professional sport leagues, but there was no league that surpassed 20% representation. And I think 15% is around where most of them fell. So what does this mean? Well, on a personal level, when I go to Informs, which is the Institute for Operations Research and Management Sciences, it is essentially an analytics conference. It has a sports track. And so there will be individuals from analytics, from management, who will present in this sports track. And what does it mean for me? Well, writing the op-ed made me aware of what I have to think about that can be a bit tiresome. So planning for the conference, what do I wear? When I'm presenting, am I smiling too much? Am I smiling too little? Am I being authentic without being too cheerleader-like, which is a personality trait? I tend to be enthusiastic, obviously passionate about the field of analytics. So am I over passionate about this? And I realized that I was trying to emulate something I was never going to be able to emulate, which was my male counterparts. So that thinking about those things is tiresome. Plus, feeling like you have to work harder to make your voice heard, feeling like you have to prove yourself in a different way. Those are all things that are a bit exhausting. And knowing that I had that experience told me, okay, there are other women who probably have this experience. And perhaps writing the op-ed for the Sport Business Journal, perhaps continuing to publish and trying to be as authentic as possible can help the field within my network, within my circle. Well, I got lots of feedback about that op-ed. There were employers who were very interested in where to recruit women. So Women in Sports Tech is a great group that offers scholarships for women, grants for them to—
I'll link it below.
What'd you say?
I'll link it below in the—
Yeah, please do. And it's a great outlet because they always show pictures of their people who are heading into the field. And they also have mentors listed there for women. And the pictures speak 1,000 words because they are all women like me. And so I look at the pictures like, okay, like this is actually an environment where I feel comfortable. It's like walking into a cafeteria, not knowing where to sit. And then all of a sudden you see the table and like, oh, okay, I'll sit there. It is exactly that feeling. That is the exact feeling. And there were professors who wrote me about women in their sport analytics classes and how they're outnumbered and how to handle it. And where I have been able to affect my immediate environment, I know that the encouragement of women and minorities to feel comfortable in the space is something that each individual, regardless of minority status, can affect by bringing some of these issues to light. And that's what the Sport Business Journal article did, is just bringing these issues to light. Like, yep, you're going to feel like this, and there are reasons why, but it doesn't reflect your ability. It's just a feeling, and feelings come and go. Plus the reframing of imposter syndrome as to, okay, you're challenging yourself, you're putting yourself out there. These are natural feelings that come with, especially for underrepresented groups and fields. So congratulations, you're on your way.
Well, I think it's yeah. I think it's unbelievably powerful that, if you look at your background, you were an athlete competing at the highest level, right? You have a PhD, you're doing incredible research, and for you to still be having these feelings where when you're in the room, you're probably at the very least in the top 10% of the most qualified people based on playing the sport and having an actual background studying it and doing the analysis, and you're still having these feelings. To me, that's something that signals there's something wrong if you're so uncomfortable in these scenarios, and if the nature of the domain is stifling like that, right? And so I could not agree more with just having these conversations and letting people know that, like, hey, like, if this environment isn't comfortable for diversity, people are not going to come in. You look at, I think there was a pretty famous football coach that resigned recently for some emails that got out, and it's like, if those are the types of people working in a league like this, like, as a minority, as someone who's not like a straight white male, it might be pretty uncomfortable to work in an organization like that. And like, it's good that these things are public, and you're seeing what types of people these are, and hopefully that drives change. Something else that from my limited experience, I've seen incredible the incredible power of is these online communities, right?
Mhm.
I mean, if you go into, I use this example a lot, but if I go into a bar, right, what are the odds that I find someone else who's a data scientist, like down the street? Pretty small, maybe like 5% on a given night. No, way smaller than that. Like, well, we'll just go with 5%, right? And what are the odds that they also are interested in sports and like analyzing sports? Like even smaller. And then what are the odds that they also are interested in like content creation or storytelling? Like infinitesimally small. I can go onto a corner of the internet and find 100 people interested in all those things in like a day. And I think that there's a lot of ways that online communities can connect people who are feeling a lot of the same things. I would imagine that there's hundreds of girls or women who are interested in sports analytics, and they just haven't found the place to connect with people like yourself yet. And obviously the website that you mentioned, I'm sure is a great place for that. But you know, all it takes is for someone to create something like that, to be able to grow something like that. And the idea of sharing experience to me is so powerful and scalable now that
Mhm.
that videos like this are more mainstream, or Slack groups or Discord servers or any of these ways to communicate that are becoming more prevalent. And that's something that truly makes me happy. It's like one of these like technology for good type of moments where I'm like, wow, this can really bring together people who are geographically different, but in like very similar situations where they can learn from each other. And I'm grateful for all the communities I'm a part of. It blows my mind how willing people are to help each other and learn from each other when they come together around a similar cause or having similar challenges.
Agree, and it creates a nice forum for mentorship that can exist on a more consistent basis. When young individuals wanting to work in analytics post that they've achieved a new job or that they've created a new visual. That's something that I can see without them having to call me up and say, hey, do you have time to talk? It's something that I can see on LinkedIn, especially because that's where a lot of that material is posted. So I like that. I like it for that reason too.
Well, you touched on a really important thing for me, which is sort of scalable mentorship.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't have the time to do mentorship every week with people. I don't have the time to, see 4 or 5 people and check in with them and do those types of things. I'm also a little bit, I short mentorship for purely learning data science, right? I think a lot of the skills to learn the domain, you have to wrestle with, like overcoming the adversity and like learning how to Google and learning how to go on Stack Overflow to conquer problems is an important skill, right? On the other hand, I think mentorship in like the specific domain of, hey, you're a woman who's in the sports analytics domain, and you have to navigate all of the crazy things with work. You have to deal with the experience of being probably the only female in your workplace. Having a mentor for those experiences are like so valuable, because it's conveying so much more than just like the math that you could learn online, right? That's not something that you can learn from a book or a course or whatever it is. Like that's real world experience that you need. I don't know exactly how I got on that tangent. I guess I was talking about scalable mentorship. So my idea is that you have scalable mentorship for like broad learning, but you really need specific mentorship for like experiential, like life lesson learning that doesn't neatly fit into the box of like, hey, this is this algorithm, this is XYZ.
Right. Agree. Yes, completely agree. And mentorship's a big part of feeling comfortable in the space.
So something we talked about offline is a couple of the incredible mentors you had and your experience, I guess, growing with them and the doors that's opened. I'd love to hear more about that. I'm a big believer in like celebrating mentors when they have made a difference for you. And also like what did you learn? What did you not learn from those experiences?
Now I'm running through the list of individuals who have encouraged the process. And I think the most important part of mentorship in terms of learning in the analytics space is being unafraid to ask questions, no matter how silly they may actually be. I work hard to make those questions informed. You know, it's something that if there's something I don't know the answer to, then I will research before I ask. But there are individuals who work at Ohio University now who've been very influential in terms of, okay, I'm reaching this coding area or this coding error and I need help with it. Or I am not sure exactly what the reviewers mean when they're asking me for a confidence interval around the inflection point of the natural language processing progression into the sport industry. Are they asking for the general bands around the estimation line, or are they asking for some kind of point estimation, or should I report both? Like, should I over-report? Anyways, there's individuals who will answer those technical questions, and no matter what I ask, that is a very important piece of it. There are other mentors who will help that other side of it, of making sure that you feel encouraged and supported along the way when you continually put yourself out there. The risk part is fun. Trying something new is fun. Executing a talk for an international operations research audience is fun. But as soon as I sign up for those things, I literally press go right away for those opportunities. And then, so what have I just done? You know, what have I just done? And so at that point, you know, one of my mentors was like, you said yes, didn't you, to go to this International Operations Research Conference webinar? And I said, yeah, of course. And he said, you'll be great for it. You know, those people who keep it positive, I think both sides of that coin have been very big parts of my experience.
Yeah, I think, you know, something that I really enjoy about the way you describe mentorship is, you know, what you said is you can't be afraid to ask like stupid questions, right? And something that comes before that is trust between you and a mentor. And trust doesn't happen overnight. I mean, sometimes you're like, okay, this is my faculty advisor, or like, this is my PhD advisor. Like, I have to trust them right off the bat. But for the most part, mentorships are like an extended friendship in my mind, where, you know, like you're learning from them, but they're also learning from you, right? I mean, there's this gap that most mentors have, that at least if I'm mentoring someone, I'm a little bit out of touch with their specific situation, right? And the way I look at it is that if I'm mentoring this person, I can learn what the experience is like again. Right? I can use that to make more informed content, or I can use this to, you know, maybe change the paradigm of how I view a problem. And that trusting relationship, I think, is what a lot of people forget about and miss out on, is that, hey, like, it's not just like one direction where one person's asking a bunch of questions. This is like a trusted advisor. This is a person who has your best interest in mind and is invested in you over time, and you're also invested in them over time. Like as a mentor, you should be really excited when any of your mentees have success, because part of that is your success. You're sharing it. That it's like this really deep bond, and I think it's incredible to strive to create those bonds in your life and in your experiences. I think that there's very few bonds like that. And, you know, I would say, like, I wish I had more mentors personally that I could share that way with, but for better or for worse, I'm like very selective and maybe too careful of other people's time occasionally. But at the same time, for those who have impacted me in that way, I'm unbelievably grateful.
Agree. Express a lot of gratitude. I usually nominate them for awards.
That helps too.
I had a clean sweep of Ohio's Research Mentor Awards last spring.
Awesome. Heck yes.
I nominated 2 of my individuals and they both won. And that's the victory lap right there.
I love it. And well earned. You know, I think that's obviously they don't do it for an award. I think that the success of your research and your career and your experience is, I would hope, worth way more to them. But it's incredible to celebrate the people that have helped stand us up when we're kind of knocked down, and been there for
Right.
us when, to celebrate, but also to to kind of wallow occasionally.
Agree. I won the research award. So it
There you go.
really was quite
Heck
sweet. And
yes.
they were both instrumental in that. And they know that because I wrote them very strong letters for their annual review, but that's priceless. It's really priceless. That type of friendship is very priceless.
Well, so since you did win this research award, I would love to hear more about your specific research and some of the things that
Yeah.
you're looking into. If I recall, a lot of it was related around NLP with
Mhm.
professional sports teams. And admittedly, NLP is not an area of my greatest strengths, but it is something I'm fascinated in and would love to learn more about from you.
Sure. This investigation represented everything I thought I would find, I did not find. In fact, found much more that I never thought I would. And what I was seeing was some anecdotal stories about natural language processing and the incorporation in the sport industry. Conversica was issuing chatbots. It was reinventing the sales process for chatbots to engage in the pre-qualification phase. But I really wanted the full natural language processing story for the sport industry. I wanted to know how teams were incorporating natural language processing, if they were. And I wanted to know the timing, meaning when did they start? When could we expect full saturation? And I wanted to know why. And so all of these questions asked and answered in the research project. So the how are they incorporating it was an endeavor all on its own, because I needed to set the tone for the conversation. So there is no, here's the natural language processing use cases. No, in literature, it's typically, this is something very technical. We are investigating an algorithm for natural language processing, or it seems to be on the opposite side of the continuum. It's isolated trade cases like what I was talking about. So I did an integrative literature review, which put me, and just creating the search terms, put me in contact with people with backgrounds in linguistics, computer science, because I needed to know how to search the vast landscape. So this integrative literature review resulted in 6 broad domains for natural language processing inclusion in the sport industry, with many listed below that, with many different types of uses listed below that. And so when I issued this survey to the sport industry, examples of the functional areas would be the sport experience. So actually at the sporting event, enhancing customer relationships, thinking about the industry, those types of functional areas for natural language processing adoption. But there were teams that included, of the 91 teams in the investigation, 48 had adopted natural language processing in some way, shape, or form by May of 2020. Because I was using full timestamps, I had to stop at 41 after 2019, because you needed the complete timestamp in order to estimate the trajectory, the diffusion of natural language processing into the sport industry. 334 unique use cases across all these teams. Now, what I thought I would find is that we were in the very, very early phases. But the truth is, we were hitting, when I was investigating this 2020, we were hitting the inflection point. The model, a discrete version of the BAS model, estimated that the peak was right in between, I think, 2019, 2020. So I was pretty shocked by that. But in all of these use cases considered, and that full saturation would be reached in 2031, closer than we think, that all sports teams would regularly be using this, like all sports teams are regularly using business analytics, or most, you would say most all. So
Minus the Washington football team.
That to me was very interesting. But the 334 individual use cases, that just opened the floodgates for me to then apply these algorithms in different ways. So one of the projects I have going is a topic modeling algorithm applied latent derelict allocation. And I really need to give myself bonus points every time I say that correctly. because it is a bit, it is a bit of a mouthful, but applying that to the pivotal WNBA season during the pandemic where they really took off, and topic modeling reveals those inherent topics in social media, for example, something you can't efficiently analyze on your own. But there's much more than that. So in terms of customer surveys, if there's, you issue out this big customer survey, you get a ton of responses back. Maybe you get over 1,000 responses, and there's long qualitative passages. You can analyze those for the topics that customers are discussing, and then apply sentiment analysis to understand what sentiment is attached to those topics. So it's opened the floodgates for me to launch this line of research in natural language processing. And I feel so clear and direct in my immediate future goals. Of course, on the side, I really like, because I've taken extensive preparation to learn the space, meaning I've invested in quantitative coursework from statistics to business analytics, descriptive, predictive, prescriptive, and beyond, that I've understood that there are gaps in sport management research that can be filled with new types of analyses, like association role mining, very important to Amazon, making suggestions to us. You bought this product, you'd probably like this one based on patterns of what other people have purchased. So it is fun, it is exciting, it's new, it's challenging in all the right ways, and was just talking to a colleague about how this is just a nice crescendo happening in the middle of my career. It's been wonderful to unearth. I'm so grateful to all the sport organizations that participated, but it's been wonderful to open the floodgates on this. It's been a really interesting investigation where, again, I thought I would find a certain thing. Maybe we were in 2 years of adoption, but I think the earliest adoption was 2010.
Wow, that is unbelievable.
So they say, but I listed out what natural language processing was, and you say you hope that your respondents will answer accurately. But yes, that was the earliest documented use was in 2010. So the floodgates are open, and work is exciting. That area is exciting right now.
Well, I think that speaks to almost the broader power of focusing on a project or a problem and trying to understand it. Is, as you described, you get this crescendo of other problems and other areas of opportunity, and you get to choose. If something's really interesting to you, you can keep kind of going down the rabbit hole. And I guess it's more like a gopher hole where they're all interconnected. And that to me is something that I get up excited every day, because one thing branches into another thing, and it branches into another thing, and then I'm looking at something that maybe no one's ever looked at before, right? And it's,
that's right.
And you're discovering something new and novel, and to be able to share that, in my mind, is one of the most fulfilling things that you can. Is it's like, hey, I've laid eyes on this thing, or come to this insight that no one else, at least that I know of, has done before. I can't think of. I mean, that's a little bit, in my mind, what it is to sort of be human, right? Is to like want to strive for something that is, but maybe not human. That is like the definition of science, right? Is we want to progress and understand things that weren't conceptualized before.
Mm-hmm.
I am a little curious from my own perspective, how many teams have looked into natural language processing for performance related things outside of the marketing and business side. So I think that there's probably a lot of applications for contract negotiation. Yes. And for like looking at sentiment analysis, or not even sentiment analysis, just like analyzing different players' social media activity to determine if they might be a liability or a good teammate, or some of those types of things. Any idea on the scale at which that's being done? Because I think that's going to be a difficult issue, but a relevant one, knowing the players union.
There was only one use case that didn't receive any uses, and that was roaming robots in the sport experience. In terms of what teams used most prevalent would be something you would expect. I think it's intuitive. And it was directly tied to revenue generation. So advancing customer relationships was a big part of it.
Butts and seats.
That's right. And utilizing chatbots to make the sales process more efficient and to create a sales culture that was not 300 people a day get hung up on by 297, right? So a lot of the major use cases were tied to that, including sentiment analysis for customer accounts. However, there were teams that reported things like using it for contract resolution. That happened much less frequently than these initial use cases tied immediately to revenue generation. But that makes sense because analytic initiatives fail when you fail to communicate the business appeal, so to speak, or the direct tie to advancing the business. When you fail to communicate that, that's when the analytics initiatives fail. So it makes sense that professional sport teams would be starting in that direction.
That's incredible. I mean, to me, honestly, it's just fascinating that some teams are doing that in some form. I know, depending on the sport, like baseball is very far ahead. I think football and basketball, I'd be astounded if they were doing anything even remotely close. But I would like to be proven wrong, and it has happened a couple times before. So,
well, in terms of natural language processing, because it's just starting, I don't know how well you can make conclusions, but in terms of analytics inclusion, the baseball and the NBA actually are ahead of the NFL and the NHL. And it's interesting that the NFL and the NHL are kind of lumped together in that laggard situation because it's for very different reasons, right? Football doesn't seem to need it, quote unquote, so to speak. And then maybe the NHL does need it quite a bit. So it's interesting that ties together.
Well, honestly, the football one has surprised me the most because football compared to basketball, it lends itself more easily to analytics because there's plays, right? You can chunk things down. Like baseball was the easiest to analyze because everything is isolated. You're like, each pitch is an isolated event. Like football has a closer thing to that, but basketball, you don't have necessarily set plays. It's a completely dynamic game. And in my mind, that makes it a very difficult thing to analyze effectively. I know people obviously do it. I mean, we've worked with an NBA team, but to me, it's still like a fascinating dynamic where it's like culturally it's different. I think like the way money works in these leagues is different, and just the landscape of sports in general related to analytics has always been fascinating to me.
Agree. And of course, I'm speaking to the business side. That's predominantly where my reference point is, the organizations themselves using it to advance the business. So
that makes perfect sense. Yeah. And I'm on the complete opposite side, which is like exclusively ops and performance side. So, I mean, it is interesting too. I bet there's a lot of teams that on the business side, they're heavily using analytics, and on the like actual team and performance side, they're not. And it's like, you see the value in one part of your organization and you're not willing to make that transition on the other side. Like, what is going on?
That's interesting. It's interesting. Well, the direct competition, the clear metrics associated with winning the game, you know, there's a lot that lends itself for the on-field to be prime for analytics inclusion.
Yeah, well, a little bit on some of these teams goes just an incredibly long way, but you have to have buy-in, you have to have adoption, and you have to have teams that love the process like we described, and I don't know if a whole lot of them do. Liz, this has been such an awesome conversation. I really enjoyed hearing about your story, your work, just everything about this has been awesome. Are there any ways that people can get in contact with you? Any projects or things you have coming up that you'd like to share? I would love to hear them. I'd be happy to link them along with this interview.
Oh, fantastic. I will send the link to the global webinar I'm attending and speaking with 4 other panelists. Would love to promote that within your audience if they are interested. And I would also really like to share my email address. That's the best way to get a hold of me, or LinkedIn. But honestly, I'm old. Am I old fashioned by saying that? Wanless, my last name at ohio.edu. If you are thinking about data science, I would love to chat with you about it. Let's be real about that. I really love talking about it. I love listening as well. So again, Ken, fabulous conversation. I'm so glad that we were able to get together.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming in. And I can't wait for everyone to hear this podcast.